Montana Territory, 1882. The sun burned low behind the mountains when Delilah Garvey stepped off the stagecoach into the dust-choked street of Bitter Creek, carrying nothing but her mother's Bible and a letter that had ruined her life. The letter had come 3 weeks ago, sealed in red wax and penned in the long, slanted hand of Reverend Ellis Gray. It told her she was to marry a man she had never met, an older widower with 2 children and a ranch 30 miles north of town. "It is your duty," Reverend Gray had written. "God has chosen this path for you. Obedience is a woman's highest virtue." Delilah had read the letter once, then again, then burned it in the fireplace before her hands could tremble too much to strike the match, but the words stayed. She had not spoken when the widow who raised her after her parents died said, "This will be good for you." She had not spoken when the stage was hired. She had not spoken when the driver asked her if she was heading to the Flat Creek Ranch to marry Mr. Abner Lott. She had only nodded. Now, Bitter Creek was a single muddy road cut between 2 ridges with a saloon, a feed store, and a church that leaned slightly to the left. The wind kicked dust up around her skirts. Her boots were cracked from the journey. "You lost," the voice came from a few feet away, low and even. Delilah turned. A tall man stood beside a chestnut mare, reins looped around his wrist. He wore no badge, no star, just a worn trail coat and a black hat pulled low. His eyes were the color of the river stones she used to skip as a girl, gray with a hint of blue. His hands were calloused, scarred, and still. "I am not lost," she said, her voice steady. "I am waiting for someone from Flat Creek Ranch." The man frowned. "Abner Lott's place?" "Yes." He looked at her like he was trying to work out a puzzle he did not like the shape of. "You his kin?" "No." Delilah squared her shoulders. "I am to be his wife." The man's frown deepened. "He send for you?" "No, a reverend did." There was a silence between them, heavy as the cloudless sky. Then he said, "You do not look like a woman who wants to be here." Delilah looked away. He stepped closer, careful not to spook her. "You do not have to go." "I do." Her voice cracked just slightly. "They told me it was my duty." "Whoever they are," he said, "they are wrong." Delilah looked up, something hot rising in her throat. He held her eyes. "No one owns you." "Especially not a man in a letter." She blinked. The wind moved her hair across her cheek. "I'm Lawson Finch," he said. "I run cattle south of here." "Delilah Garvey." He tipped his hat. "You do not look like you belong to anyone, Miss Garvey." She did not know why that made her chest ache, or why she almost smiled. A boy came running from the livery, maybe 9 or 10 years old, shouting, "Lawson, Lawson." Lawson turned. "What is it?" "It's Clara. She will not come out of the stall again." Lawson sighed. "Tell her I will be there in a minute." The boy ran off. Delilah tilted her head. "Your daughter," he nodded. "Clara and Caleb, twins. Their mother died 5 years ago." "Oh." Delilah looked down at her gloved hands. "I am sorry." Lawson did not speak for a moment. Then he said, "You want coffee?" "What?" "There's a pot at the livery." "You look like you could use something warm." Delilah hesitated. "I will not try to talk you out of doing what you think you have to," he said gently. "But you do not have to go up that road tonight. Have coffee, meet the twins. Let the world sit still for an hour." Her throat burned. "All right." The livery was warmer than she expected. A fire burned low in a pot-bellied stove, and 2 children sat cross-legged on a blanket near the far stall, one with wild curls and a stubborn scowl, the other quieter, drawing something in the dirt with a stick. "This is Clara," Lawson said, nodding to the girl, "and Caleb." Caleb glanced up and gave a cautious wave. Clara crossed her arms. "Who's she?" "A guest," Lawson said. "She is having coffee." Clara sniffed. "She is pretty." Delilah smiled, surprised. "Thank you." Caleb stood and offered her the stick. "Want a draw?" She knelt beside him, her skirts folding under her knees. "Sure." They drew a crooked horse together. Lawson poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. Their fingers touched. "Thank you," she said softly. He sat beside her on the floor, long legs stretched out, hat resting on his knee. "You are kind," she said after a moment. "I am tired of watching people get pushed where they do not want to go." Delilah looked at him. He looked back. "I do not know you," she said. "No. But you are not the first woman to show up in Bitter Creek with a letter and no choice. How many others?" 3, 2 left. One stayed and married him." Delilah drew in a breath. He does not hurt them, Lawson said, reading her face, but he does not love them either. He wants someone to raise his children and keep his house, that is all. Is that so wrong? No, he said, but it should be your choice. She looked down at the coffee. I do not know what I want. You do not have to know tonight. The fire snapped. Clara tugged on Delilah's sleeve. He made soup. Delilah blinked. You did, Lawson shrugged. It is mostly beans. It smells good, she said. They ate together, the four of them, in the dusty light of the livery. Clara told a story about a snake that had gotten into the chicken coop. Caleb whispered secrets into Delilah's ear and giggled when she gasped in mock horror. Lawson watched her laugh. Something in his chest shifted when the children drifted into sleep. Curled up against the hay, Delilah stood. I should go, she said. Lawson rose too. Where, I suppose? To the ranch. He stepped in front of her. You do not owe him anything? I owe someone. No, you do not. She looked up at him, eyes shining. You helped me, she whispered. I would again. She did not say goodbye. Just stood there, caught between what she had been told and what she was starting to feel. I do not know what this is, she said. It is not a letter, he said, and that made her smile just a little, but it stayed. Dawn came pale and slow over Bitter Creek, the sky lined with streaks of ash and rose. Delilah stood at the edge of the livery doorway, arms folded tight against the late spring chill, watching the sun draw long shadows over the church steeple and the water trough. Inside, Clara stirred beneath a horse blanket, her curls tangled and her mouth half open in sleep. Caleb lay beside her with a hand tucked beneath his cheek. The fire in the stove had gone to embers. You didn't sleep, Lawson said from behind her. His voice was quiet but not uncertain. Delilah didn't turn. I was afraid if I closed my eyes, I'd forget how I got here. He came to stand beside her, hands in his pockets. You didn't look like someone who forgets easy. I don't, she said. That's the trouble. The wind moved through the slats in the barn walls, carrying the scent of horses and cold iron. I'll ride up to Flat Creek today, she said, still looking out. Lawson didn't answer right away. When he did, it was measured. You sure that's what you want? I'm sure it's what's expected. He nodded once. Then I'll take you, she glanced at him. I thought you didn't believe in going where you're not wanted. I don't, but I believe in seeing people safely through. Her throat tightened. You don't have to do that, he shrugged. Maybe not. But I'm going to. They rode out after breakfast, Delilah on a borrowed mare with a temperamental gait, Lawson on his chestnut, the twins left in the care of an older woman named Mavis who ran the dry goods store and had known Lawson since he was a boy. He didn't explain more than he needed to just that he'd be back before supper, and the children were to help stack the wood in the back. The trail to Flat Creek Ranch followed a shallow ridge and wound through a stand of firs that whispered in the wind. Delilah kept her eyes ahead, the reins loose in her fingers. Lawson rode beside her, quiet for the first mile. You ever lived on a ranch? He asked eventually. No, he nodded like that told him something. You know anything about cattle? No. Good with children? I don't know. He looked at her, not unkindly. Why'd you say yes? Her jaw tightened. Because when someone gives you a roof in exchange for your obedience, you take it. Because it's better than being turned out with nowhere to go. He didn't speak for a while. The horses picked their way over a rocky patch where the trail dipped down toward a creek. My mother used to say that obedience without love is just a cage with prettier bars, he said. Didn't understand it when I was young. I do now. Delilah looked down at the water. You talk like someone who's been caged. I talk like someone who's watched others live like ghosts in someone else's house. They rode on in silence. Flat Creek came into view just after midday. 3 buildings, a windmill and a corral with a sagging gate. A woman in a faded shawl was putting laundry on a line. She looked up, then looked away. Abner Lot came out from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He was thick around the middle, his hair gone mostly gray, a limp in his right leg. You're late, he said, eyeing Delilah. Delilah dismounted without a word. Lawson stayed in the saddle. Who's he? Abner asked. She didn't answer. I'm the one who brought her, Lawson said. She didn't want to come alone. Abner's eyes narrowed. She's not your concern. That's not your choice. Delilah stepped forward, her voice even. You wrote to the Reverend, not to me. Abner looked at her, confused. I didn't ask to come here, she continued. I did because I thought it was the only way forward, not because I wanted to be someone's servant under another name. Abner's mouth opened, then closed. I don't know your children, I don't know this land, and I don't know you, she said. You think you'll find better? He asked. Delilah didn't flinch. I think I'll find honest. Lawson turned his horse without a word. Delilah followed. They didn't speak again until they were halfway back to town, the air warmer now, the trees humming with early insects. Are you angry? She asked. No, she looked over at him. You didn't say anything. You said what mattered. They crested a hill where the land opened wide, the sky stretching blue and endless. You said last night that people don't own each other, she said. I did. Then what do we owe each other? He looked straight ahead. Truth. And time. Delilah let that settle. After a while, she said, I don't want to be sent again. You won't be. They rode the rest of the way in easy quiet, the kind that didn't need filling. When they reached Bitter Creek, Mavis was sweeping the stoop. She waved them in and said supper was nearly ready. Delilah helped wash the children's hands and sat with them at the table. Clara told a story about a rooster she'd named Clementine. Caleb passed her the cornbread without being asked. Lawson sat across from her, his hands steady as he sliced meat. That night, Delilah slept on a cot in the storeroom behind the shop, the window cracked to let the breeze in. She lay on her back, eyes open to the dark, and thought of a man who didn't press, and a girl who named chickens, and a boy who gave her a stick to draw with. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was waiting to be claimed. She felt like she was beginning. The afternoon sun had just begun to dip when Delilah stepped through the back of the dry goods store with her sleeves rolled to the elbow and her hands dusted in flour from helping Mavis with the day's baking. The shop bell tinkled faintly as customers came and went, but she didn't look toward the front. Her eyes were on the open door beyond the storeroom where the sound of hammering drifted in steady rhythm. She followed it. Lawson was on one knee beside the livery's side wall, a length of plank pressed against the frame. He held a nail between his fingers, the head balanced against the wood, and drove it clean with a single strike. You're fixing the hinge, she asked. He sat back on his heels, brushing sawdust from his trousers. Door was dragging. Wind'll make it worse come autumn. She leaned against the post, folding her arms. You always think that far ahead, only when I plan to be somewhere long enough to care. Her gaze lingered on the line of his jaw, the way his collar had come unbuttoned near the throat. And do you? He looked up at her, eyes steady. I do. Delilah didn't look away this time. Mavis asked if I was your wife. Lawson wiped his palms on a rag before standing. And what did you tell her? That I wasn't. She paused. But I didn't say I wouldn't be. He didn't move, not even a breath. She stepped closer, voice quieter now. I've spent most of my life following rules someone else wrote, but I've never once been asked what I wanted, not until now. He searched her face. And what do you want, Delilah? She looked down at her hands, then back up. I want to be seen for who I am, not what I can do for someone. I want to wake up knowing the day is mine to shape. I want to belong somewhere without having to earn it like a debt. You belong here, Lawson said. You've belonged since the moment you drew a horse in dirt and made Caleb laugh. She smiled, small and real. You see everything, don't you? Only the things that matter. He stepped forward then, slow and sure. She didn't move back. His hand came to rest gently at her waist, not claiming, just grounding. Clara told me you read stories to them at night, she said. He nodded. Caleb likes the ones with maps. Clara prefers anything with danger. I used to read to the children at the mission. They liked fables, the ones where the fox gets outsmarted. You do have a way with wild things. Delilah tilted her head. And what does that make you? Lawson's thumb brushed lightly at her side. Someone waiting to be caught. The moment stretched between them, full and unhurried. She leaned in, just enough to rest her brow against his shoulder. His arms folded around her without hesitation. Inside, the bell rang again. A voice called for Mavis. Hooves thudded past on the road, and the wind shifted faintly through the trees behind the barn. Still, they stood there. I'm not afraid, she said. You shouldn't be, but I am cautious. I'll wait. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Not forever, he smiled, soft at the corners. I won't need forever. Later, Clara insisted on showing Delilah a patch of wild mint growing near the riverbank. They knelt together, pulling up a few stalks for tea, while Caleb tried to trap a grasshopper in a tin can. Delilah's skirt caught on a bramble, and Clara helped her untangle it with a careful hand. Are you going to stay with us? The girl asked, not looking up. Delilah touched the edge of Clara's sleeve. Would you want me to? Clara shrugged. You laugh like our mama used to, but better. Delilah's throat tightened, but she smiled. Then yes. I'd like to stay. That evening, Lawson brought down a set of old books from a trunk in the loft, tales of western trails and river voyages, and Delilah read aloud while the children lay on their bellies, feet kicking behind them. The fire popped once, and Clara yawned halfway through a sentence. When the children were asleep, Delilah stepped out onto the back stoop, the sky above heavy with stars. Lawson joined her, 2 mugs of steeped mint in hand. Will you build something here? She asked. I already am. She looked at him, and he looked right back, the night quiet around them. I want to build it with you, she said. You already are. They sat side by side, their shoulders touching, watching the stars move slow over the roofline. And in that silence there was no question left to answer, only the shape of something new being made, steady as a home built by hand. The rains came in early June, slow and soaking. Bitter Creek turned slick with mud, the fields to the south softening under the weight of it. On the second morning, Delilah woke to the sound of water dripping steadily from the eaves above the livery, and the smell of damp wool rising from the blanket covering Caleb, who had crept into her cot sometime in the night. She eased out from beneath the quilt, careful not to wake him, and stepped barefoot onto the cool plank floor. The small stove in the back corner still held a glow from last night's fire, and she coaxed it back to life with cedar kindling Lawson had stacked neatly by the wall. She moved through the room in quiet rhythm, each motion purposeful, setting water to boil, cracking eggs into a tin bowl, slicing bread already gone a little tough at the edges. Behind her, the door hinges creaked. You always this quiet in the morning? Lawson's voice was husky with sleep. He stood in the doorway, hair damp from the rain, shirt sleeves rolled halfway up his arms. I had a lot of practice, she said. The mission bell rang at 5. If you weren't up before it, you missed breakfast. He leaned against the frame, watching her. Did you ever sleep past it? Once. I was 9. Sister Alma made me scrub the floorboards with vinegar and a rag until my knees bled through my stockings. Lawson's jaw tensed. You deserved that? No, she said simply. But that wasn't the point. He stepped into the room, reaching for a coffee tin on the shelf. You ever think about going back? Delilah shook her head. They never let you forget that you were there because no one else had wanted you. Lawson poured the grounds into a pot, then filled it from the kettle. You're wanted now. She turned, her hands stilling on the loaf. Am I? I want you here. He met her eyes. The children already think you belong. I do too. She looked down, brushing crumbs from the table. I keep waiting for someone to tell me it's not real, that it's just kindness or pity. I don't pity you, Lawson said. I admire you. You stayed upright when most would have folded. Delilah didn't answer. She sliced another piece of bread, slower this time. After breakfast, the rain eased to a mist, and Lawson hitched the wagon to his mule. I promised the Jenkins boy I'd help mend their fence today, he said. He's been trying to clear a thicket where a cougar passed through. Delilah nodded. I'll take the children to the church. Mavis said there's a sewing circle meeting in the back room. Clara'll hate it. She'll sit still if you bribe her with blackberry preserves. Lawson smiled faintly. You've learned fast. I've watched, she said. Carefully, he stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You don't have to keep proving yourself. I'm not, she said. I'm just remembering how to be part of something. He touched her hand lightly. Then let it be ours. That afternoon, the sewing circle buzzed with quiet talk and the shuffle of fabric. Delilah took a place near the window where the light was best, threading a needle for a woman who'd lost hers in the folds of her apron. Clara sat on a bench beside Caleb, pretending to be disinterested, though her hands itched toward the basket of buttons at her feet. You're the one staying with Lawson Finch, said a woman with a pinched mouth and a voice like old paper. Delilah didn't look up. I am. You plan to marry him? I haven't said. Well, the woman said, her lips tight, some folks might wonder what sort of woman moves into a man's barn before she's got his name. Delilah kept her eyes on her stitching. Some folks might wonder why that's their business. The room went still. Clara glanced up, blinking. An older woman with silver streaks in her braid gave a soft chuckle. You've got backbone, she said. That'll serve you better than a name ever will. Delilah relaxed her shoulders. I've needed it. She left the church with the children just as the rain stopped for good. The clouds broke open, revealing blue that looked scrubbed clean. Clara ran ahead to chase rabbits from the tall grass, and Caleb walked beside Delilah, holding 2 wildflowers pressed together at the stems. For you, he said, offering them up. She took them, swallowing a sudden tightness in her throat. Thank you. Back at the livery, Lawson returned with his hands scraped and a streak of dirt across his collarbone. He washed at the pump while Delilah peeled potatoes, the air between them easy. I heard about the church, he said, drying his face. Did you? Mavis said you put Mrs. Cutler in her place. She put herself there. He smiled. You're not afraid of them. I've been afraid of worse. He stepped behind her, resting his hand lightly at her back. You're not alone anymore, she leaned into him just enough. I know. That night they sat on the stoop as the children slept. The moon rose slow over the ridge, the air cool and sweet with damp earth. Delilah rested her head on Lawson's shoulder. What would you have done if I'd gone to Flat Creek that day? He didn't speak for a long moment. I would have waited, he said finally, but I'd never have stopped hoping you'd come back down the ridge. I think I knew that, she whispered. He turned toward her. Will you stay? She didn't hesitate. Yes. He kissed her then, careful and sure, the way a man does when he knows what he's found, and the world, for once, felt made for beginning. By late July, the wildflowers had given way to sun-bleached grasses, and the wind blew warmer, carrying the scent of dry pine and horses. Delilah stood in the shade of the cottonwood near the corral, watching Clara coax a runt calf to accept a feed bottle while Caleb carefully wound twine around a bundle of kindling. Lawson was on the roof of the livery, replacing shingles that had cracked under the weight of the last storm. She could hear the steady scrape of his boot heels and the occasional thud of his hammer, constant and unhurried. Mavis came walking up the road with her shawl gathered tight around her shoulders and a folded letter in her hand. Post came early, she said, handing it to Delilah. Marked from San Antonio. Delilah's brow creased as she opened it. The handwriting was familiar, a careful slant, each word pressed dark into the paper. She read it once, then again slower. When she finished, she folded the letter in half and slipped it into her apron. Everything all right? Mavis asked. It's from the mission, Sister Marjorie. Delilah looked toward the barn, then back. She's retiring. They want someone to take her place. Mavis studied her. You thinking of going back? Delilah shook her head. No. But I think I should answer. Mavis gave a short nod. That's your choice. Later, as the sun dipped low and painted the roofline gold, Delilah brought Lawson a tin of water and sat on the edge of the ladder as he wiped the sweat from his brow with his sleeve. You ever think about what you'd be doing if you hadn't stayed here? She asked. He took the tin, drank slowly, then handed it back. I'd probably be somewhere quieter, maybe running a trap line up near the Gallatin. I used to think I wanted to disappear. And now, he looked down at her steady. Now I'd rather be seen. You are, she said. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the letter, and handed it to him. He read it in silence, then returned it. They want you to lead? Yes. And will you? She looked out over the ridge. I think they want the girl I used to be. Not the woman I am now. You don't owe them her. I know. Lawson set a hand on her knee, firm and warm. You've built something here. I see it every morning in the way the children look at you, in the way you walk with your head up now. Delilah leaned forward, her fingers curling around his. I want to build more with you. You already are. They came down from the roof in the last of the light. Caleb helped gather tools, and Clara stood barefoot on the porch, holding out a bowl of berries she'd picked from the bush near the fence. We saved the good ones, she said. Delilah took the bowl, then crouched and kissed Clara's forehead. That's mighty generous. Clara shrugged, but her ears turned pink. That night, Delilah sat at the table with a sheet of paper and an ink bottle, the letter from the mission open beside her. She dipped the quill and began to write, slow and deliberate. When she finished, she folded it once, sealed it with wax, and set it beside the door. Lawson leaned in the doorway, watching her. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked. She smiled. "I am." They married on the first Sunday of August beneath the same cottonwood where she'd first watched the children play. Mavis stood beside her with a small bouquet of sage and late summer yarrow. Caleb wore a shirt he'd outgrown but refused to replace, and Clara carried a ribbon tied to a stick like a banner. They stood hand in hand as the preacher spoke, but Delilah barely heard the words. She was watching Lawson's eyes, how they stayed fixed on hers like there was nowhere else in the world he'd rather be. "I do," she said. "I do," he echoed. After, the town gathered behind the livery for stew and bread and cider. Someone strung lanterns across the fence posts, and a fiddle played long into the dusk. Delilah danced with Caleb while Clara clung to Lawson's arm, reluctant to let him step away even for a moment. When night fell, the guests drifted home one by one. The children curled up on a blanket near the fire pit, the stars bright above them. Lawson took Delilah's hand and led her quietly to the small room behind the shop where they'd moved a week before. It wasn't large, but it was theirs. The bed was made, the window open to the warm breeze. A single oil lamp lit the room in soft amber. He ran his thumb along her jaw. "You sure?" Delilah nodded. "I've never been more certain." They undressed slowly, reverently, hands learning each other the way one learns a trail by walking it again and again. When they came together, it was without hesitation, without fear. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered his name like a prayer she'd finally chosen for herself. In the quiet after, they lay tangled beneath the quilt, his hand resting over her ribs where her heart beat steady. "I never thought I'd have this," she said. "You made it," he replied. "With your own hands." They slept with the window open, the breeze carrying the scent of drying hay and lavender from the edge of Mavis's garden. Years passed. The store expanded, and Delilah helped Mavis run it until the older woman passed it into her keeping. Lawson built a second stall for the livery and took in travelers passing through, often offering shelter for those with nowhere else to go as someone once had for her. Clara grew into a sharp-eyed girl who could shoot straighter than many men by 15, and Caleb loved books more than bridal work. But he kept the firewood stacked, and both children called Delilah Ma by habit. Before long, in time, Delilah planted a garden behind the livery. Tomatoes, carrots, and squash. She taught Clara how to preserve jam and read aloud with Caleb under the porch when the rains returned. On quiet evenings, she and Lawson sat side by side just as they had that first night, watching the ridge go dark as the stars woke. His hand never left hers. They never spoke of what might have been, only what was and what would always be: a life built with care, a home shaped by choice, and a love that never once needed to be proven again.